Okay, so chivalry. Chivalry. I want to talk about chivalry in 2016. Um, Today, when we think of the word chivalry, we tend to think of men treating women in a certain way. What's less known is that chivalry actually initially had several concepts. Of course, the term originates in medieval Europe, and there are equivalents around the world. Actually, there are equivalents in the Middle East and in the Far East. Um, and basically we associate it with men's treatment of women, but actually in medieval Europe it also meant a knightly duty to his country and to God. So the thing about being virtuous towards maidens was part of it, but it certainly wasn't an exclusive part of it. Today we would never associate it with having religious connotations. Um, Perhaps the connection with women and womanhood came about from the Virgin Mary. That is one plausible explanation that, especially during the Crusades, these soldiers of Christ, these Christian warriors, um, that is certainly a rational point to look at. That the Virgin Mary, they were protective of her image in that sense. So that could be where the connection with women came from. The paradox of this, of course, is that for many women for centuries they were second class citizens. Um, but within that knightly conduct, again, that was also a class thing because it certainly wouldn't have been to women of the lower classes or peasants, so to speak. It would have been women of the same social class, more likely. Anyway, that's just brief history. I think the term chivalry seems archaic today because I think it is automatically associated with guys being pushovers, or to give a rather impolite modern term, white knights. So a white knight, of course, we associate as guys being overly polite or overly protective of women online, especially, um, ostensibly for somewhat fake reasons, or let's say because they think it's going to make them look good or something. So it's really a pejorative. If a guy is accused of being a white knight, it's it isn't a good thing for him because he's seen as being as pandering to the woman side of the argument simply because she is a woman. Um, I think the 20th century has certainly had a great influence on the role of chivalry and gender roles. Throughout history, there's always been um, there has, on one hand, been set structure for gender roles, but there has also been somewhat surprising things in the past as well. There's an early photograph of Franklin Roosevelt in a girl's dress. Now, that might seem not connected to the main subject here, but the point I'm making is we tend to associate gender ambiguity as being a modern thing, but actually it has a bit of history. Anyway, I think in today's context it is seen as archaic because the emergence of feminism in the 20th century really, really pushed this idea of strong, powerful, independent women. Um, and ironically, that has probably done some damage in terms of chivalry. So when women especially could play in a "where are all the gentlemen gone," they could start by looking at feminism because feminism taught women that if you do act like a lady, if you do want to be treated like a lady, then you're being subservient and you're going into old weak gender roles. I'm not saying that feminism is exclusively responsible for that, but I think it's a fair point to make that feminism has definitely altered the way women think about themselves. And in its most extreme form, you do have a situation where if a man does help a woman, then she sees it as presumptive and she assumes that he only wants something else. So, say for example, a man is on a train and a woman has heavy luggage and he offers to help. Decent women will thank him, but there are some women who will get very defensive and say, "Oh, I could do it myself." And I think that's almost certainly a byproduct of feminism. So that's worth noting. I think one thing that is important to bear in mind that women, like men, are not all the same. Now, when men say they respect women, as a general concept, it sounds good on the surface, but when you really, really, really get down to it, do you really mean that you respect all women in terms of individuals? I mean, I will say honestly, I don't respect all women. There's some women that I don't have much time for. I don't like their personality. I have not much respect for them, so no, I don't respect them. I don't respect, for example, angry, aggressive ladettes who get into people's faces. I don't respect bullying feminists who think they can shout down other women for not agreeing with them. There are a number of women I do not respect. I do not respect yobbish women, as we would say in the UK, who are just aggressive, unpleasant people. So I think when people make these sweeping statements that they respect women, it then gets you into a situation where you end up looking insincere. You can't respect an entire demographic. Rather, I take the approach of giving people the benefit of the doubt. Now, if I'm in a busy shopping centre and I hold a door open, I hold a door open for a man or a woman or a man. It just seems to me to be common courtesy. It's part of being a decent citizen. If it's a busy shopping centre, it's a polite thing to do to hold the door open for the person behind you. If I saw a man who was struggling with something and he dropped it, I'd offer to help. And I'd do it with a woman as well. It's just part of being a decent citizen. I will say though, where if there is a concept of chivalry, where I connect to it is women I personally care about, that I know, family members of course, but especially my significant other half. Now, I'm single at the moment, but when I was with someone, I've had 3 girlfriends. When I've been with them, I always really tried hard to treat them like a lady. Now, the reason for that is not because I felt some sort of social pressure to do so. It wasn't because of feminist pressure. It wasn't because of anything other than I wanted to. It felt like the right thing to do to treat the woman that you love. And that's something I absolutely stand by. I can honestly say I would die for the woman I love. And that's not a bravado statement. It's not an insincere statement. It's a simple truth. Hope I'm never in that situation. But I would be prepared to do that. No, I wouldn't be prepared to die for any woman. I would be prepared to protect a female friend. But then again, it gets into the issue of, well, shouldn't the issue be in teaching women to protect themselves? I think that's a very worthwhile thing. The only thing about that is no amount of self-defense can really, if you have a rapist, let's say, okay, a woman may have a spray can and she may know some self-defense moves, but in the end of the day, the average man is stronger than the average woman. It's just a fact. So sometimes if, for example, it's late at night, I would either offer, and I'm with a female friend, I would either offer to pay for a taxi for her, or I would walk home with her. And that's nothing to do with wanting to get into the sack with her, it's just because I care about her. And unfortunately, some women do misinterpret that. Now, would I do that with a male friend? No, I wouldn't. I would, if he was if he was new to the place, I'd say, well, do you know which way to go, and that sort of thing. And maybe say, oh, give me a text, just let me know you get back, okay. But I wouldn't walk home with him. So I admit I do see a sex difference between men and women in that regard. But what I don't do is allow myself to be a pushover to anyone. So I hold the same standards to women. If a woman is being rude or disrespectful to me, I treat her exactly the same way as if a man was doing that. So for instance, if I'm having some sort of political dispute online, and a woman who's really rude to me, she calls me names or whatever, I'm going to give as good as I get. So I think the dimension of this has changed somewhat. And I think, I think there are some things that wouldn't do to women that I would do to men much faster. I mean, I wouldn't punch a woman in the face. I just wouldn't do that. If a woman attacked me, I would physically restrain her, and I certainly wouldn't let her do it. But I can't see myself punching a woman in the face. A man, yeah, I'd do it if I was protecting myself. I wouldn't do it off the cuff, but I would do it if it was to protect myself. So in that sense, yeah, I do still have some more traditional concepts. I also find it very uncomfortable arguing with female friends. I don't like it one little bit. I mean, I don't like arguing with male friends either, but it makes me very uncomfortable. Thankfully, it doesn't happen much, but when it does, I hate it. So part of me is old-fashioned, but another part of me is a modern man, in the sense that I treat men and women the same. And one thing about egalitarianism is you have to have the same standards. Now, I don't believe in violence against women for a second, and I have contempt for men that do that. It's an awful thing. But I also don't have much respect for women who think that just because they're women they can be aggressive. And there is another point, and this sort of comes under this banner, something no one ever speaks about. We talk about teaching women to learn self-defense and so on. I think that can be useful in the case of other violent women. If you have a girlfriend and let's say she has to put up with some drunk women, now a man finds himself in a difficult position because on one hand he would be obliged to protect his girl. I personally would. But if that meant then getting into physical altercation with other women who were hurting her, personally I would. And I know that there'd be people say, oh, you're hitting a girl, blah, blah. I take the view, if a woman is going to be aggressive and behave like a man, then frankly, she shouldn't complain too loudly, or her defenders shouldn't complain too loudly that a man is going to treat her the same way. We have to have the same standards on violent men and violent women. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I think all of these things, though, are connected to how we view gender roles in the 21st century. I admit there's... when it comes to women that I'm close to, I do probably respond in a slightly different way. And as a general code of practice, I find that I am quite polite to my female friends. I don't know if chivalry is the right word, but I'm respectful towards them. And I am respectful towards my male friends as well. But the communication is slightly different, and I can't deny that. But in terms of double standards, if a woman's going to be obnoxious, I'll treat her just the same way as a man. In terms of girlfriends, I believe a man should treat his lady like a lady. I mean, where's the romance if you don't do that? Some guys are sort of like, I think they let gender politics override their sense of romance. So forget feminism, forget all that. Just, where's the romance? So if you're sort of saying, oh, she always should pay for half of the bill and she should walk me home. And if you wanted absolutely 50-50 in that sense, the thing is, it isn't even about egalitarianism. It's about treating her like a lady. That's not about losing any sort of equality. It's just about romance. That's it. I would say that's what it comes down to, a sense of romance. So I don't really understand guys that have this attitude of kind of not treating their girlfriend or their wife like a lady. I mean, of course she should treat you with respect as well, no question about it. And that's another point. I would not tolerate anyone disrespecting me, no matter how much I cared for her. I wouldn't tolerate any sort of disrespect, like in the sense of someone speaking down to me or whatever. Anyway, there's a lot of issues there to think about. Let me know what you think. Chivalry in 2016. Is chivalry dead? Has chivalry adapted? I believe it has adapted. I don't believe it's dead. I believe it's just adapted. Or do you believe in, you're completely against it? I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't agree with the sort of women should get away with anything logic and, women could be obnoxious and get away with it. I don't agree with that. But nor do I agree that romance should be completely thrown out the window. I don't think there's anything wrong with treating women well. I like women. I get on very well with women, and I have no problem with that. That doesn't mean I love or respect all women. There's some women I don't like. I'm just saying, as a general issue, that's how I feel. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts.